Thank you for your patience. We are just working on going live. Okay.
We are live.
Thank you. Okay, good morning. I'm the Executive Director of the Public Design Commission, and welcome. If you're joining us via Zoom, please note that we do not have items for public hearing on today's agenda. For our committee meeting, we will not hear public testimony or vote on those projects. I will now hand it over to our chair, Deborah Martin.
Good morning. My name is Deborah Martin. I'm the chair at PDC. Welcome to the Public Design Commission meeting. Today's meeting is being held in person at City Hall. Members of the public can attend and give testimony either in person or remotely when we have committee items that are open for testimony, which we do not today. The public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda and items number 28749 to 28768. Are there any recusals to note? Okay, seeing none, let the record show there are no recusals. I'll now call for a vote. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote for the consent agenda. Isabel Castilla?
Approval.
Lori Hawkinson? Bill Heinzen?
Approve.
Carrie Maloney? Manuel Miranda?
Approve.
Meryl Tisch? Jimmy Van Bramer?
Approve.
If Commissioner Maloney and Tish could repeat their vote after turning on the.
Approved.
Approve. Okay, thank you. Great. And I also approve, so let the record show all in favor. The consent agenda is approved. And we'll now begin the committee meeting. We'll start with the conceptual review of the construction of the Hutchinson River Combined Sewer Overflow Facility at East 233rd Street and Boston Road and Hollers Avenue and Hutchinson Avenue in the Bronx. Again, we'll not hear public testimony or vote on this project today. Presenters, you can begin when ready.
Good morning, commissioners. It's nice to see you today. My name is Alicia West, and I'm from the Department of Environmental Protection. I'm the Director of Public Design Outreach. So we're really excited to be here today to present our designs for our Hutchinson River Combined Sewer Overflow Facility. I'm joined today by Austin Seid from HDR, who will be doing the rest of the presentation. Kevin Lloyd is also from our consulting firm, and my colleague from DEP Wing Zito. Okay, so our project is located in the northeastern section of the Bronx in Eastchester, on the western side of the Hutchinson River. The area is zone manufacturing, and we're actually inside the industrial business zone, or IBZ, which was created to foster and grow industrial businesses in the area. We're going to be presenting today designs for two buildings, a screenings building and a drainage pumping station. Both will work together to reduce the effects of combined sewer overflow into the Hutchinson River. But first, a little primer on New York City's sewer system. I always find that helpful. So about 60% of the sewer system in New York is what we call combined, which means that when you flush your toilet or run your tap, that water is draining to the same pipe as water that's collected on the street during a rainstorm, right? So in dry weather, combined sewage is routed through the sewer system and it's sent to one of New York City's 14 wastewater treatment plants to be processed. However, in rainy weather, the system can get overwhelmed. And that's basically when the amount of water produced by a storm is just exceeding the capacity of the sewer system, of the pipes, right? And so that can result in an overflow to the system, which is called combined sewer overflow. And the reason it's like this is actually because it was designed to behave in this way. It was designed as a fail-safe, right? So rather than having combined sewage come up into people's homes or into the streets, it was designed to overflow into a local waterway, in this case, the Hutchinson River. And we have been working with our state and federal government partners to reduce the amount of combined sewer overflow citywide. And combined sewer overflow facilities are one such solution that we've been working on. And the way that these work is they basically intercept and store that combined sewage that would otherwise overflow into the waterway during a rainstorm. So here's a little bit more detail about how it works and specifically how this project will function. So we're going to be intercepting the sewer system on East 233rd Street here. We'll be rerouting that into our screenings building. So inside the screenings building, you can see in this diagram here on the upper right corner, the incoming combined sewage goes through the screenings building, and we have these very large bar screens. And so it's sort of like a big sieve. And so what those are doing is they're pulling out any debris that's found its way into the sewer, whether that's like litter from the street that swept it down a catch basin or what have you. Then the water is routed into this very large underground conduit or tunnel. This is a storage tunnel. It can hold 2.8 billion gallons of combined sewage. Should we ever have a storm that exceeds that volume, we do have the ability to outfall into the river. However, that sewage will have the benefit of already going through the screenings building, so it will be a much cleaner overflow than it would if it was just a direct outfall. Okay, so our water is impounded in our storage conduit, and when the storm passes, we have our drainage pump station, which pumps the combined sewage out of the tunnel and back into the sewer system here on Pinckney Avenue. And then that is then conveyed to our wastewater treatment plant in Hunts Point. So that's the skinny on how this works. I'm going to hand it over to Austin, who's going to walk you through the site context and the design. Feel free to interrupt him with any questions you may have. I'm also going to stick around for questions at the end. All right, Austin, you have the lip.
Thank you, Alicia. Just make sure this is working. Hello?
Is Mike working?
Yes, we hear you. Thank you.
You can hear me okay? Oh, great. Thank you for having me. My name is Austin Syed. I'm the architectural lead on this project. Thank you very much, Alicia. So what you're seeing here is the conduit that is running underneath the ground. One day, somebody might look at this and say, there's something interesting going on here. We have two buildings that seem to share the same language. Here in this neighborhood, we have mostly industrial buildings on this side of the hutch, and we have two major roads that pass through. Most of the people that travel in this area are on the highway. And then on this side of the hutch, we actually have some industrial area as well, but there's a very large residential area here along Eastchester Place. So there's going to be folks that are going to come out of their houses and they're going to get a pretty good glimpse of the buildings. So here's a more of a contextual view. Sure, yes.
What do they glimpse at now?
Right now, they're looking at recycling, industrial type facilities that move scrap material. They're, very, mostly loud industrial businesses. Absolutely. That's it will be, that's the plan. The plan is something interesting. So I'll get into that. So this is a view here of, this is what pretty much most of the buildings look like. They're industrial type buildings. They have direct access to the street. There's not a lot of people walking around down there. So as I move on, you'll see some of these other facilities. But again, you have industrial on this side and residential over here. These are the type of buildings that you're seeing here. So you have the Department of Sanitation. It's interesting. It has iron spot brick. It has some specularity to it. Somebody was invested in this design. And then here on the right, you have the Mill Wiping Rugs building, mostly masonry, has some ribbon windows. It lets in natural daylight. It's probably very interesting to work in that building. And this is our neighbor here at the screenings building, Alpha Recycling. There's a bit of porosity from the street. You can kind of see and glimpse into the building and get a sense of what's going on, what kind of activities go on here. This is our site here on this side with the corrugated metal. As of right now, you can't really see into the site. Oh, sorry, and across the street, just to accentuate that, a lot of these businesses, they have exposed structural steel elements. So we're trying to build a language here. And then this is the site of the drainage pumping station. This is the embankment for the I-95. And right now, this is Hollers Avenue. A lot of what you see here, if you were to extend the views, are trucks. They basically park on this street. And trailers. There may even be people living out here on this street. So you don't get a lot of pedestrians just walking around, okay? And then, of course, we have our billboard, right? We have our beautiful billboard here. And then we have other types of businesses, scrap metal, junk, storage facilities, and they all have this industrial language of corrugated metal, exposed steel, access gates, signage just kind of popped on the face of the building. So we have a kind of a wide vocabulary of various industrial type buildings that we were looking at in the early stages of design. So we thought, you know, this is a project that's about moving water. We're on the water. You know, can we extract some of the interesting qualities of water? You know, the rippling texture, the specularity of the surface of the water. You know, we thought, well, maybe we start with the vernacular type industrial language that we have here that we're surrounded by, and then we start to maybe amplify that a bit, right? So we started with, let's start with the rippling of the water. Let's come up with a couple of module types that we could use to maybe drive the envelope of the building. Now we know that this is a industrial type building. It's for the Department of Environmental Protection. These buildings are very functional. They're going to be driven by equipment. They're driven by the conduit that runs underneath the ground. So in terms of site orientation, it's really important that the buildings are configured and oriented to, you know, with respect to the conduit. Where's the water in the conduit, and how do the buildings interface with what's going on below the ground, right? So with all of that said, we wanted to focus our effort on trying to develop an interesting looking building, because there's a lot of building that's underneath the ground that people are not going to see. So we're trying to accentuate what people do see. So we developed this panel language of potentially different panel profiles. And then we thought about color. You know, maybe we could look at parts of the facade that could have a gradient, and it could have kind of like the playfulness that the surface of the water has. And we thought that it might be interesting to start with the colors of the DEP logo, right? So people would experience the building, they'd immediately understand, if they're familiar with the colors of the DEP, they would kind of get it. It would make sense, right? This is a DEP building. And then we were thinking, okay, well, are there any other buildings that do this, right? So we did search around a bit, and we landed on a couple of buildings. One is this building by Damien Hirst Studio. It has a beautiful brick facade. It has a glazed surface. It's very organic. It undulates. The bricks are custom, but it's gorgeous. And then we have these other buildings here, Haytown Art Center, fantastic perforated metal facade, very durable brick base. It's very it's almost like it's beautiful because it's so simple, right? And then we have this building, the School of Film and Television at Loyola University by SOM, which has this interesting facade consisting of a perforated screen cladding. And it has these undulations that really lend themselves to the kind of study that we were working on at the time. So these were our precedents, and this is where we started. And where we kind of graduated to was, you know, what if we have a building that has this really organic, undulating brick veneer, right? And we know that these buildings are very horizontal, so we want to also accentuate the verticality of the building. So we orient the brick in a stack bond vertically. We create a transition strip out of a ribbon window, which is similar to some of the buildings that we're seeing out on the strip there on East 233rd Street. You know, it reflects the sky, it lets in daylight. This is not a normally occupied facility, but we still want to make sure that we're providing daylight to the people that are going to actually be entering into the rooms. And then we have this fantastic opportunity to create this rippling metal facade. So you have all of this precedent for corrugated metal, but you know, we're drawing our cues from the water. So there's this fantastic opportunity to create an undulating, ever so changing facade as you move around the building. So we tested it. And this is what we came up with in the initial phase without deploying it on either of the sites. And then to take it a step further, we thought about the cladding system, and not only are we drawing our cues from the water, not only do we have water in the conduit, but let's create a rain screen system so that we're actually bringing water into the building, right? Let's let the water into the facade so that it actually enters into the skin of the building, and then we release it out through the sill when it weeps. So this is just an example of the rain screen cladding system. Insulated facade, you can see the mineral wool insulation back here, and an aluminum support system. So then we thought about, how do we deploy this? What's our strategy? So here's the screenings building site here. We have lot 1, lot 201, and there's actually a small lot back here, lot 2. As I had mentioned before, this is East 233rd Street, transitions to Boston Road here. And this is our neighbor, the Alpha Recycling Building. But the interesting thing about this site is that it's right on the Hutch. So once you get to the back of the site, there's a very sharp embankment that goes down into the river. So what we did was we thought, okay, well, we have to consider, well, where's the conduit with relation to the site, and how does the building get organized on the site, right? So the first thing we did was we provided a perimeter fence because we need to maintain security at the site. And then we established, well, how do we maneuver on the site and what makes sense for the building? So with the conduit not being shown, it's a little tough to understand, but we did orient the screenings building with relation to the conduit. And then once the building was locked in place, we started to bring truck movements in and think about how are we going to bring debris, because as Alicia mentioned, the screenings building it functions by taking floatable waste out of the water stream. And in order to do that, and which I'll get into in a minute or so, there's actually equipment in the building that rakes debris out of the water that's in the conduit below the building. So what you're seeing here is a maneuvering diagram for a truck that would pull in, back up to the building where we have the overhead door where the waste container is. It would back in, grab the container, take it out, and then they also have to be able to load an empty container in. So there were various maneuvering diagrams that were done to establish how all of this gets organized on the site. Back here, you have the outfall, which, as Alicia mentioned, at some point, there could, things will get released into the Hutchinson River. But we accounted for that movement, and we also located our generator and our transformers to the left of the site. So this is the building here. The first floor of the building, as I mentioned, there's the conveying system and the bar racks. The building's about 55 feet wide by about 71 feet long. The two major spaces in the building are the electrical room, which is, this is kind of the service side of the building. There's also a room here for the backflow prevention system and a toilet for the employees when they do show up on the site. Most of the rooms open outwards. They don't generally communicate with each other. That has to do with the classification of the spaces with respect to hazards. So everything really exits out. The only stair in this building is in this location here, and this goes up to the roof. This is the low roof, and this is the high roof. And currently, we are taking time to plan out where the heating and ventilation equipment goes, the various drainage systems for the roof. And in particular, on the high roof, we have this element here. This is a hatch, so that at some point in the future, if they ever have to take the equipment out of the building, they can take the hatch off the building, and they can crane the equipment right out off the roof. And if I'm not mistaken, there is an intention to put solar panels on the building to generate electricity, and that's currently being worked out as well. But before we put the cart before the horse, we have to work out the systems design first, and then we see what's left and available for solar panels, and then we'll start studying that a bit. So here's some elevations of the building. I'll just kind of run you around the four sides. I already mentioned how the materials are deployed, but you can see the kind of stacked effect of the brick, the ornamental steel, the window, and the cladding panels. The bulkhead stair is the highest element in the building. Overall, the screening building is about 40 foot and 6 inches. But that's for the bulkhead stair, about 30.5 for the high roof, and about 20 feet for the low roof. So at its highest point, it's about 40'6". This is, on this side here, you're seeing the overhead coiling door. Again, this is tucked behind the building, so it's really not expressed towards the street. So the business end of the building is tucked away. While people are pulling trucks in and out, it's really not happening out. Even though it's an industrial character, the neighborhood, it's kind of tucked behind, which is, I think, should be more peaceful. Another side of the building, very similar. It's all four sides have a very similar aesthetic. Okay, and here's a couple of sections through the building, just so you could understand what's going on inside. So, as I said before, the entire building is sitting on the storage conduit. There's some void space underneath the building, but you have the service side of the building, and you have the screening side of the building. Right here, you have these rakes that go down into the conduit and pull material out. It actually dumps it onto a conveyor and then dumps it into a container here, and that's what the trucks are accessing. They're coming through the overhead door, grabbing the container, and pulling it out. So the building is very much driven, functionally in terms of the equipment. You have a bridge crane in here that moves back and forth to grab different pieces of equipment. Then you have another layer for HVAC equipment, and then the roof. And then you have the hatch and the HV equipment on the roof. Another section through the service space showing the overhead door. So I'll move on to the next slide. Any questions about the screenings building?
This will only be on, there'll be security and maintenance that's going on, that will only be occupied at certain times when there's like a huge storm, basically.
We send crews out. It is an unmanned facility, so it
Yeah.
operates remote. If it's necessary, it turns on. We have operators who visit it, make sure it's in good shape. They come by usually once a week or daily, or just depending on what's needed, but there's not anyone who is working in here.
And the the design, DFE, I was just looking at the section because you're near the river, and I was thinking of your electrical equipment on the first floor and all that.
Both of the buildings are designed above the base flood elevation, plus freeboard, plus all of that.
Everything.
Yeah, everything is
Yeah.
protected. Yeah. So let's talk about the drainage pumping station a bit. As I showed you before, this is a pretty severe embankment next to the New England Thruway. There is a truck repair facility on the north side of Hollers. Hutchinson transitions into Hollers. Hollers goes underneath the Thruway and comes out on the other side. If you know anything about this area, you might know that on this side of the highway is the MTA bus depot. So this is the street I was telling you about that's mostly trucks and trailers and folks just kind of camping out. There is no sidewalk on this side of the street, and there is this large embankment, and we have this billboard structure here that I was showing you in the photos. We are on lot 3. The plan is to create a sidewalk, create new curb cuts, 2 access gates on either side of the site. The drainage pumping building is in alignment with the conduit, and there's a small court in between, and I'll talk more about that when I show you the floor plan. Generally, the building is paved all around. There is some vegetative area to the left and the right of the building. And out in the yard is the generator and the transformer, similar to the screening building site. What you're seeing here are just general truck maneuvers that are required to access the loading dock. That's this area over here. And I'm going to show you why that's important. This is the drainage pumping building, what we call the access room level. It's the first floor. And this is the service side of the building, very similar to the screening building. It has a service side and what I call like the business end. This is a high bay space served by a bridge crane and a monorail. And what you have here is an opening in the floor. This building basically separates into two main rooms. One is the dry side of the building and one is the wet side of the building. On this side of the building, there's an opening in the floor into the lower levels of the building. There's really a large pump room at the bottom of this side of the building. On this side of the building, there's what we call the wet well. And that is where the building interfaces with the storage conduit. That's where the sewage kind of enters into the building. And when I show you the sections, you'll understand a bit more. But these stairs are dedicated to accessing the wet well. This stair is only dedicated to accessing the dry side of the building. On the service side of the building, you have a unisex toilet for the occupants when they're there and a space for the backflow prevention device. And there's some paving and some stairs out around to access the side yards of the building. This area here, this loading dock is very important because if they ever have to remove equipment from inside of the building on the dry side, that equipment has to be pulled up by the bridge crane, taken out and transferred to a monorail system, and then brought out onto the loading dock where a truck could pull in and take the equipment off. So all the guardrails here are removable, so you can get the equipment in and out. This here is a crane that's used. It interfaces with these 4 openings. If the debris in the wet well ever exceeds the size of the storage vessels, they can actually pull the storage vessels up out from the belly of the building and bring it out onto grade where they can dispose of it. Yep, okay. Low roof, high roof, similar as the screening building, heating and ventilation equipment locations, and we're planning for solar. Just not showing the solar yet. Some elevations of the building, very, as I said before, the language is the same. People will look at these 2 buildings as if they're related. We have a large industrial swing door that's used to bring the equipment in and out. And this is the structure here that will support the monorail for bringing pumps in and out of the building through the industrial door. Here's a section through the building showing the service. These are the service spaces up here. These 2 stairs communicate with the wet well. Wet well 1, wet well 2. This is where the sewage is interfacing with the building. And these are bar screen racks where DEP employees can pull debris off of the waste stream. Another section cut transversely to show you the dry side of the building and the wet side of the building. So you can see the piping here. It takes the water through, sucks it through the pumps, and can discharge it back out into the sewage system. As I mentioned before, both sites are going to require secure environments. We're planning for a perimeter fence consisting of a short 8-inch concrete curb, a durable base with a say an anti-climb type fence with very narrow, where you can get a very narrow, you cannot get a narrow foothold on the fence. And the tips of the fence would also have pointed edges to prevent people from kind of scaling it. All galvanized steel and powder coated. We're currently planning for premise identification totems on both sites. We're experimenting with whether they're located in the perimeter fence or if they're set back. You know, the important thing is that the fence is porous enough to be able to see the building so that we're not basically blockading these fantastic looking buildings that we're designing. You want to be able to see them and experience them and enjoy them. Here are some renderings. This is one of the screenings building. This is looking east. This is the screening building looking north. And this is the drainage pumping station, I believe looking south. And this is the drainage pumping building looking east.
Our last slide, I think. So thank you so much for your time. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
And to start, sorry, a functional question. I understand what the screening facility is doing. Is it then that the water flows from the screening facility to the pumping station? Or
It
can you talk
goes-
about the?
Right. So it goes through the screening building and then it goes into the storage tunnel. And it hangs out in the storage tunnel until we have until 2.8 billion gallons, right? So until we have capacity restored in the rest of the sewer system and at our treatment plant to be able to manage that amount of wastewater, right? So then, once the storm's passed and we have capacity restored, the pump station pumps out the tunnel back into the sewer.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
So the pump station's really in service to that storage area.
Yes.
And now it returns the wastewater into our treatment channels.
Right, exactly.
So this water is not treated yet. It's not treated
Right.
here.
It's on its way to the wastewater
Got it.
treatment
So
plant. And this
now-
is the whole point of this is to make sure that it gets there, right? Like
it.
it's just so that it doesn't outfall into the river, right? We can impound it. And then when we have capacity restored and the wastewater treatment plant can manage it, then it's pumped back into the sewer system and it's conveyed to treatment.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's very
absolutely.
helpful.
HDR. We do all kinds of buildings, transportation, wastewater, all kinds of architecture. Yeah.
I would just say thank you. I think it's like super well documented. It's very clear.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful drawings. I appreciate
you.
the detail to the drawing and yeah, I think it's very exciting. Thank
Appreciate
you.
that. We're excited too.
Thank you so
Super
much.
Cool and clear. Yeah, thank you for doing this.
We appreciate it.
I also agree with Lori. I think it's a great project. Recognizing though that it's still in concept, I just have some questions about the siding, specifically this rendering. Are you cutting into the bluff and then creating that retaining wall, or does that the retaining wall does not exist?
There's no retaining wall
Uh-huh.
now. We have to build something there. There is a neighboring property that might be doing something, and we're in communication with them just to see who's going to do this first, and how that would wind up. But what Austin is showing here, and it's a little difficult to see because this is projecting a little dark. But the face of this retaining wall will have a form liner that kind of echoes the corrugated pattern of the building. So we want that to be a considered backdrop.
Great. Yeah. And I guess my question is, again, I know you're still in concept, but maybe when you come back to us, if we can have some side sections where we can understand the relationship of the bluff, the retaining wall and the building, that would be helpful.
Sure.
I had issued a prior comment about the landscaping around the building, and you mentioned the intent to include bioswales. I am interested to see what happens to the water on that bluff against the retaining
Mhm.
wall, and to see if there's any possibilities, even though that's beyond the site. How do we not create a negative impact on that bluff, right? Water wise, and how can you take advantage of the open spaces around the building to hopefully minimize that or mitigate some of that surface water runoff?
It's a great comment. Thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure to bring that back.
Manuel, but the signage, this pylon thing. I mean, should it be part of the fence? You've seen that be quite successful, just wondering.
Yeah, so the pylon is something, Austin's done 3 pump stations for us in Staten Island, which you might remember, maybe came through last year.
Yeah, PSD, yes. Yeah.
And those 3 pump stations had that same palette of fence and totem, that worked really well in those sites. It's something that, as Austin said, we're still trying to figure out where that totem exists because we want it to be visible. It may just be part of the fence in line with the fence. So that's sort of what we're tinkering around with now. Thank you.
You're saying that there's very low levels of like pedestrian activity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems mostly to be very large trucks.
The great thing about this building is that it's actually across the street from a bowling alley.
So we'll get some bowlers.
So we'll get some bowlers. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it might be nice, to incorporate some just, diagrammatic information, like what it's doing, similar to like the earlier slides.
Mhm.
Like, what this, in a very simple kind of like poster-like way. That could be combined with like the identification sign.
Yeah.
Too.
Okay, we'll look into that.
I see it's so great that you design something that spectacular when no one's gonna work in the building. And relatively few people are gonna see, maybe the bowlers are gonna see it. But I think it's aspirational and elevational, right? That the city of New York is building quality structures like this. I love the blue-green nod to the water at the base. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
And it reminds me of, I mean, it's, I think, a little bit nicer, but there's a DOT, right, facility in Willets Point, right, that's going up. That's also not going to really be seen by the public, but we're building these quality structures all around, and it just makes me very happy for the city of New York. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we definitely believe that it's important to be proud of our infrastructure and to help people understand that, we have a long legacy of building great things in the city. And so we aspire to be a part of that. So thank you.
Speaking for one of the commissioners who is not here, had a question about the fence height. And we were wondering whether you were thinking of lowering it at all, or will it remain the standard 8 feet?
So the standard 8 feet is something that's specified we have a Bureau of Police and Security, which many people don't know. So it's something that's specified by that group. We can certainly talk to them. They are a creative bunch. But what we found is that we've been able to bring fence heights down from like 10 feet with razor wire to something that's 8 feet and much more attractive. So we have pushed the envelope quite a bit in the last few years.
Thank you. Before I summarize, commissioners, any more comments or questions? Okay, so I want to echo what everyone's saying. It's very exciting to think, public buildings are how we understand together like what's happening. And this communicates so eloquently, as you say, that we can build great infrastructure and that it's not a blight on the landscape of the city, but rather something that we feel proud of. So we really thank you for that. It's wonderful. And so when you return, we had 3 comments. We'd love to see some site sections. We'd love to see some information around how the retaining wall will be managed, the water, the stormwater on site, and maybe there's some on-site landscape treatment that can be demonstrative of the function of this facility and visible. And finally, maybe some ideas of public information about the function of the building, which, you know, since we have gone to the lengths to create such a beautiful unmanned facility, it would be wonderful if I'm going by for like bowling or whatever, that I can look at it and go, oh, my city put all this effort into this thing, so I have clean water when I open the tap, or I have clean water when I go kayaking or whatever,
Yeah.
would be, we should take the bow on that, right?
Absolutely.
So, so thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your
Yeah.
time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
So, we will now take a short break and we will return to the public meeting at noon.
Yeah, I gotta take this thing off.
Meeting item is the conceptual review of the design of a master plan for the construction of Jamaica Station Plaza at Archer Avenue between 146th Street and 147th Place in Queens. Will not hear public testimony or vote on this project today. You can begin. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and hello, Commissioner Maloney. Nice to meet you. As noted, we're here for your conceptual review. Did I not introduce myself? You know what, I'm having a day job now. Remember what I'm talking about. I'm Dan Waldstein for BBC. We're here for your conceptual review of Jamaica Station Plaza, which will bring open space to this community. Our presenters are Dina Ferriulo from VHB and Mike Barnacle from NPF.
Thank you, Gail. So I'm Dina Ferriulo from VHB, as Gail noted, joined by Mike Barnacle. I am the project manager on the consultant side. Okay, sorry. Okay. So I'll just talk kind of high level through some of the existing conditions and neighborhood context. We are in downtown Jamaica. In blue here, we have the approximate project outline. In addition to the public space, we are also modifying a portion of Archer Avenue. So it's public plazas in conjunction with the streetscape. Most people are pretty familiar with downtown Jamaica. It's a major transit hub, shopping district, employment destination, a lot of new construction, new buildings, high rises going up, but also a major cultural center. So this project, we're aiming really to provide additional value and within the context of the neighborhood. Here, there are a handful of projects, DOT projects that have been recently completed in the area. So you see Station Plaza, just for context, with the star, but there's the Jamaica and Archer Avenue transit and truck priority, some school safety projects, median improvements, of course, Merrick Boulevard transit improvements, and as noted, some safe routes to schools. So these are projects that have completed. And then ongoing and planned DOT projects. A lot kind of going on in this area. I won't get too into them, but we do have DOT here if, questions arise in context to Station Plaza. And I'm going to hand it off to Mike.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone, for having us here today. So these are the three spaces that we're now changing over to public space, right? And we're trying to keep some type of uniformity between those spaces, between using similar materials, paving, planting, things along like that. I think it's important. Oh, this is a curb condition. Yeah. So there are existing trees in the middle plaza, right, that we're trying to connect to. So here's our overall conceptual site plan, right? I think it's important for everyone to know that we went to the community board as well as community outreach and talked to them about what they would like in this space, and we've left a lot of flexibility. I mean, the area, we work very tightly with DOT and using their materials that are feasible, but also with the bid that they feel they can maintain the space, right? So the important part of that conversation, which kind of steered some of these designs. If you see it, we've gotten perimeter trees for canopy, but we also have benches along the perimeter. As a transit hub being so close, there's quite a few people moving through the space. So we also want to have visibility so the trees are all limbed up and not to give you that safety concern, right? Also new lighting throughout the space. And then inside the plaza, we have flexible seating so people can pull chairs around and use it as more of a communal space, but also allow the space to open up when they want to do a market or a plaza or an event like that. You just see general circulation. Again, moving, we also put 2 kiosks here to help activate the space on the daily, not only on special events. And then we also moved the transit subway station that was here into here to help open up that corner. It's just preliminary planting plans, just some trees we talked about with the group. And as well as additional lighting, both armatures for pedestrian lighting as well as new street lighting. These are some preliminary renderings that we put together. Again, flexible seating in the space, and then on the perimeter, we can have fixed seating that works with the DOT. Again, keeping the plant material very much high up and kind of low, so visibility throughout the space was clean. You see the new transit entrance. Sure. So currently it's sitting over here, right? And there's a lot of that. If you look at back, the sidewalk there is relatively narrow. There's quite a bit of movement out of that station. So locating here, we limited the plant material around there so the pedestrian could get in and out quicker.
And the building on the upper left is the ticket where you get the tickets.
Okay.
The
Right.
building.
This building
Yeah.
is existing. Yeah.
Right.
Yes, what, correct. That's where, yes, you're right. At the Jamaica station, yes. Again, we went through planting pallets with both DOT and the community, things they felt they could maintain. Concrete as well as permeable pavers so that we can, as much as we can, retain our water on the site and have good stormwater management practices. Again, working with the DOT's materials. I think that's it. Okay,
Go back to the
sure.
plan. Yes.
Commissioners, questions or comments?
I have a couple. I think my main question has been, and that was circulated to you, just to understand a little bit more what the community desired out of this space and what was the relationship between DOT and the bids in terms of both maintaining it and programming it. You mentioned on your responses the idea of potentially using this for markets or other types of events. So can you walk us a little bit like through how would you see those markets being set up in terms of the relationship of the trees, the tree beds, the fixed furniture, where does that go versus what areas you envision be more permanent as they are?
So I'll tell you, our first design had much deeper planting beds along the perimeter as well as internally. But through the community process, we discovered that they would rather have tents and the ability to set up things within that. So those beds became much smaller so that we could set 10 by 10s in essentially rows, and we set circulation patterns up so people could move through that. That was very much something I think everybody agreed that they really would like to see.
So you laid that out on that side and
We
the
did.
10 by 10s fit. And then what about the other
Same
two
with
sides?
this.
They seem a little bit
This-
narrower.
this-
Okay.
This is now permeable pavers in
Uh-huh.
here, which allows the flexibility for them to set the tents under the trees. But also this perimeter was a little bit deeper, and then we essentially pulled that back so we can lay those tents out there.
How many tents more or less fit?
Oh, I'm gonna say we probably did a layout with 20 up here with not putting any on this side, just because of the relationship with the TA there. We want people to still circulate, and then we probably had another 10 to a dozen on the left side. We showed food trucks being able to pull up on the perimeter to feed the space as well for different events.
And is the idea then that the movable tables and chairs are tucked away or grouped differently if there's events?
Exactly. But during those events, those things would be taken away by the bid and allow that space to open up.
Mhm.
For, I mean, we've talked about yoga classes, even things like that they were interested in.
Did they ever, this is more of a DOT question, maybe. Did they ever successfully move commuter van staging from by the station? They did.
Yeah, and so, hi, Commissioners, Nick from DOT. Pleasure to meet you as well. And we also have Andrew from our Queensborough Commissioner's Office. As part of the Parsons Boulevard reconstruction, which is a couple blocks further to the east, we did successfully move commuter vans to 153rd, which was a presentation we had given to you a number of years ago now. And so they are still pretty much operating on 153rd. There's a subway entrance there. It's close to Archer, close to the sort of the transit piece as well. And so we've, you know, it's still an evolving thing, but I think there's a better balance certainly than before.
I think this is exciting, right? As someone who worked in downtown Jamaica for 11 years at the Queens Public Library, just a few blocks from this, and who still uses this station when I come back from hockey games from UBS Arena. I'm very familiar with it, and I think the development that we're seeing in downtown Jamaica is very exciting. It's obviously been sort of the vision of lots of folks, including Greater Jamaica, for many, many years, and then to see sort of the infrastructure match or meet the increased population, particularly in this area, is really, really important. I sometimes wait there at the corner of Sutphin and Archer for a car because the train doesn't go straight to Woodside. But so I know that that's that huge tower right on the southeastern street, and then on the northeastern where that sort of larger park section is going to go. I'm trying to envision what it is now. I know you showed us where all those big trees are right up there.
Yeah.
Those are buildings, right?
It's the old post office.
So there's a old post office there, which is currently vacant. These buildings were, taken through Euler basically in early 2000s, I would say. So some are vacant, some have tenants that we're working to relocate actively.
Got it. So the building will be raised and the park will get built.
Yeah, so those buildings will be demolished. We're working through like asbestos and site remediation type work right now to test it. To really see what we're up against for that demo, but we will be replacing those buildings with plaza, and some of them have basements, which I'm an engineer, present an opportunity for stormwater management that I'm pretty excited about.
That's exciting.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, well,
Sorry, I had a quick question. I was wondering if you know what the program of the surrounding sites will be and how that might impact the plaza and the interaction between the people using the building.
So, we're joined by Neil from DOT, and you're working on Jamaica Now. If you want to actually take that question in context for Jamaica Now, I think that's kind of key.
So we've been looking at, there's actually rezoning afoot, and we've been looking at some projected development sites around that really proffer some possibilities, especially on the West Plaza, because I think those are projected sites around it. So I think we're all looking at the possibility ahead that maybe the new buildings could face the plaza and activate them. So we're really looking through that prism of those spaces. There's on the East Plaza, there's a hotel and development in the mid block, which is really exciting. So across the street, there's that huge residential, and then there will be a lot of use there. So I think the East Plaza and the immediate will have a lot of activating uses immediately around it. We're also going to come back to you. There's a Jamaica Avenue streetscape project afoot, which starts from Sutphin all the way to Merrick. So there's a lot of things happening as part of that plan. So I think this is going to be very different with regard to uses in the immediate. I will also say on the West Plaza, there is a school, kind of a preschool already there. So I'm not sure, where that is with the projected, but that is another possibility of possibly engaging with that property and maybe providing use and more openness for some of the students to use it.
Yeah, I would say that would be really helpful to understand when you come next time, what is the timeline of all of these developments in relationship to this? And if there have been any conversations about, how they may relate to this, would they use the space? Could they activate each other in a way? I like the idea of the school perhaps having a little bit of opportunity with this new space, and whether that may merit a slightly rethinking of it, or do we feel it's flexible enough to accommodate those future uses?
As the discussions progress with the bid as well, because that is a real possibility. And they're going to lose their bordering wall from that building. So they're going to have seat changes anyway. So I think it's really a good time to engage them.
Okay, thank you. So I want to thank you for this presentation, also for your responsiveness to what you heard from the community and making the space for markets and other uses. When you come back next, we'd love to see those studies so that we can understand just how things will sit. And also whatever information you have about the timeline and future use for surrounding sites. But also, we're all, I think I'm speaking for everyone when I say we're all very excited about the transformation of this site, making it more livable, usable to everyone who lives around here. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had one additional comment speaking for people that are not here, which was interagency coordination. And I'm wondering where you are with DCP on this and if they have been part and parcel of these latest developments.
Yeah, Secure, I don't know if you could speak about the aspect.
Yeah, this is Shakir Roko, VP within the CAPRA program. So there is a DCP zoning going on, and we've been kind of in lockstep with them. They know what's going on with the sites, and we provided information to them, but there's not been any active kind of feedback on this project because this is already kind of fully designed and permitted and stuff like that. So I don't know that. I mean, you want to speak a little more to that because I think there's some collaboration, but there's not any feedback to the project because this is already planned.
I see.
Could I just add?
Yeah.
They have been aware of this project for a long time, and it's very much on their agenda. I don't know if they've gotten into the weeds since it's that conceptual of design, but it was in our downtown Jamaica plan. It was always a kind of given. I mean, we're excited. It's coming online yet again, how many years back? So I think they're aware, and I think also in the community outreach that they have been doing, this has always been a kind of a pinpoint for understanding, what's happening here.
Great. I think they're excited to look at the new version as well and are perhaps online right now as well. Great.
Okay, well, thank you again. We look forward to your next presentation. Okay.
That went fast. We have to triple check that our next team is here.
Okay.
So we'll give them a moment.
We're starting again. The next and final committee item is the conceptual review of the construction of a ventilation building east of Bella Abzu Park, Block 6, 10th Avenue, between West 38th Street and West 39th Street, Manhattan. We will not hear public testimony or vote on this project today. And you can begin. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Angela Cavaluzzi. I'm president of Hudson Yards Development Corporation. Virtually, we have Lincoln Patel, who's our vice president and general counsel, so he'll be watching from afar. And then our team, we have Keith Koistra, who is head of design with WSP, and then the two architects from Datner, Beth Greenberg and Daniel Rogers. Beth will present the project. I just wanted to mention that Parks had asked me just to briefly, I know some of the people and some of you are new and welcome. We've presented the park over several different phases. They wanted me to just give you a quick brief history of blocks 1 and 3 were completed in 2015 at the same time as the primary entrance of the subway. Then from there, we did a contribution in kind with Tishman Speyer, who built most of the portion of block 4 as part of that zoning requirement. We had a little bit of left of that block 4. In the interim, we started working on the design for blocks 5 and 6. We did a conceptual that we brought to PDC in 2020, right before the pandemic. And then there was a prelim that was brought around 2022, end of 2022. From there, we also, I think you also recently saw the shared streets of some of the electeds that are on our board. And the community board have been pushing to create shared streets because the streets they considered were very wide and they were done under another environmental EIS that related to the stadium and other factors. So we have brought that to you as well. And now we're bringing you the emergency ventilation fan plant building. They'd asked me to just let you know why it's needed. We knew there would be some type of ventilation required because we are decking over the Amtrak line, which runs under here, underneath, and comes up and is actually pretty much right in the middle of our sites at blocks 5 and 6. So that, from that, we did think we would need some ventilation. We didn't realize how robust or stringent it would be, but there's a lot of new requirements put out there because of health and environmental issues and workers below the deck, as well as obviously the fire and life safety issues if there's a train fire. So Amtrak has many more stringent requirements. This is also the place where the system goes from electrical to diesel, is at block 6. So from that, this is where we got the ventilation building that you are looking at. I will now turn it over to Beth, who will present the project.
Thank you, Angela, and good to be here. I'm Beth Greenberg, one of the principals at Datner Architect. Dan is the designer of the project. So we will give you a brief introduction of some of our thoughts. Here you can see the actual Amtrak cut, and our building is just going to be just to the east of the park. I'm going to go through this site context pretty quickly, but I do want to call a couple of points to your attention. One is you can see the Lincoln Tunnel vent building right down the road from us. This is 39th Street, which will be the main entrance to the park, the main entrance to the fan plant. And just from the opposite direction. What you'll see here is, again, a closer in on 39th Street, and our building will take roughly the first 2 bays of the Goodyear building. The rest of the frontage will all be park. Oops. And here is the view from the west, looking towards the DHL building. It's really a neighborhood in transition, of course, being at the upper end of the Hudson Yards redevelopment. And here from looking southward. So the building itself, this is just a bit closer in, giving you an idea of how our building will relate to the rest of the park. And here you really see that it is the portal to the park. And at the first at the ground level, it was really important to us to make it be a welcoming entrance into the park. So the stairs you see on the left are the emergency stairs coming up from the Amtrak line in the case that there should be an emergency. We hope not. And we pulled the building back a few more feet beyond the 5 feet required sidewalk setback. And we worked with Hudson Yards and with MVVA to make sure that we could provide landscaping against the building. So it really becomes a backdrop to the park and not something completely separate. What you see also, the big circles are essentially the diameter of the fans that will be serving this emergency evacuation purposes. From the design point of view, as I was saying, the street level is really the critical space that we make continuity with the park, with the urban environment. We have essentially that becomes the base of the building. The body of the building has really two layers of relationship to the surrounding. One is the park level, which you can see we're basically aligning our building with the top of the tree canopy of the park. And that's the point where the ventilation starts to occur. And then the building is more or less a filigree as it goes up and extends into a parapet. We conceived of the facade really as a curtain, part of that metaphor of being a backdrop, but it is also the idea of being a drapery, something that moves, that changes from different points of view, that captures light in different ways as it goes up. And it is a rain screen. So it really will be a much lighter material, and some of our inspirations below. So just quickly, adjacent is a tall brownish reddish masonry residential building. Yes? Yes, this is
The
the
residential building.
residential building.
And the structure that the ventilation unit is,
Is this.
yes. And so I'm curious, the vista from the residential building, what is that southeast?
South is, yeah, right?
Yeah.
This is 39th Street, 38th Street. So this is the west face,
Okay,
I mean, the eastern face. of the
okay, I
park,
understand.
Looking west.
Now, just tell me, the abutment of the ventilation unit to that building
Mhm.
is up to what floor?
I don't know exactly what floor that is. We're roughly the same height as the podium. And you know, what floor we're at? Right, so, maybe 10 story, 10, 11
And
stories.
what's in those bottom 10 stories of the residential building?
I believe that is a hotel, but I am not positive on that. We
What
are,
hotel is that?
it's mostly an apartment building.
Who owns those buildings? Who owns the buildings that this
This building.
ventilation unit abuts? I'm just curious.
I don't know who the owner is.
I can find that information for you. I'm just saying, if I were living in one of those apartments,
Mm,
I would have an issue here. And I'm just curious if, as part of your consortium, have you been in touch with these people?
Have you,
Well, again, this is
and
conceptual,
what,
so that.
let's talk about it further. Also, the environmental impact about that kind of unit next to abutting residential, because if I were here, I would be very happy about having children in that apartment. So I'm just curious where you are on all of that. I mean, you're gonna have a while to figure this all out. I'm just telling you what I'm looking at and my reaction. I'm sure the design.
It's not, all the time, so we have our engineer tell you about when it is on, it's, all put on during a fire, which we hope will never happen. And then, but they do test it once every, 4 months.
I'm sure you're gonna work it out. I'm just telling you, sitting where I'm
I
sitting,
appreciate it.
and just what the issues are. And you're the architect of the project?
Yes.
I'm curious that you don't know, right, what the use of that building is, et cetera, because when you designed this ventilation unit, I'm sure you knew that it was going to abut a residential facility. So I'm sure these issues were addressed someplace, is my point.
Uh-huh.
Right.
No, you make very good points.
I always
When
do.
when you see the plan, you may understand how tight the site
sure.
is.
I'm just telling you.
Yes,
what
it's
I'm looking at.
absolutely,
Let's
it's a
figure it out,
concern.
but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you have to figure it out before.
But Beth, on that point, just to be clear, why don't you walk us through the frequency of, like, most of the time, if I'm understanding you correctly, this equipment will remain dormant. Is that correct?
It's absolutely.
It will be not deployed except once every 4 months.
Once every 4 months, and Keith could advise on the duration of the test. I believe it's
Just so we understand, because
Yes.
it were a permanent ventilation facility, there would be, I'm sure, an EIS and it would be a
Yes.
different kind of thing. So
Yes.
it would be good to understand what's the cadence of that.
Mhm.
Hi, everyone. Keith Koister with WSP. We're the lead engineers on the project. Oh, sure. So yeah, we've been in talk with Amtrak with a lot of conversations about the needs of this building. This main function is a train emergency. So hopefully, that never occurs. On a periodic basis, mostly 3 to 4 months, they need to test the fans, make sure everything's operating properly. That's usually about a day or two where they bring in their mechanics to work on the equipment. So for one day, probably running the fan, turn them on, maybe it's an hour. They work on the fans, any problems that they're having, and then they run them again to make sure it's functional, and then they're done with their maintenance. There's a random occasion when they have crews down below the park, working on the tracks directly below the park, where they would want to run it to keep the air clear and safe for the workers. That is completely infrequent, and I can't really speak to how often that would happen, but it's not on a scheduled basis.
And what is the possibility from your point, from the engineering standpoint, that there might be a decision to use it for ventilation more than the instances that you just described? Like, is there a chance that Amtrak might just decide that, you know what, it's actually better to just have it on?
There really wouldn't be a purpose for that.
That's what I'm
To
asking.
run it consistently, it would, they've never had any conversation where that was something that they put forward.
Okay.
Without crews down there, there's really no need to run it. So it'd be running an expense for them and for the city for absolutely no
For no
purpose.
reason.
It can only ventilate the location directly below the park. It cannot ventilate the Amtrak line north and south.
That's kind of what I was asking. Yeah.
Right.
So it really is only suitable for that site right there, and therefore would only be used in the event of an emergency.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
You're welcome.
And it's really very comparable to the 7-line extension ventilation for MTA, which, for example, is buried within the 55 Hudson Yards building. So part of our idea is that it is a backdrop. It doesn't scream out, I'm a fan plan, but rather I'm a fabric on a sculptural object, which doesn't have any windows, so it's rather scale less in a sense. And this shows you the section through 39th Street. The way it works, and you'll see in a section in a bit, the cellar level is really pulls the air in. There are attenuators that are sound attenuators as the emergency ventilation comes in. These are the fans. There is another set of attenuators above the fans. These are 20 feet stories to give you an idea of the scale. And then we have this plenum space, which is 40 feet high, roughly a cube, and through which the ventilation pushes out any emergency conditions. There are no windows, no windows. There's also incidental ventilation on 39th Street. And again, the idea of our facade is that it is a transparent breathing kind of facade. So this is perhaps an exaggeration of the kind of the fingers, but it indicates where the building itself has ventilation. And here you see from the train tracks pulling the smoke in, up through and out. And on the upper floors are the mechanical and electrical systems that run the building. And this is a visualization. Some of the things we're really trying to do here is both historically, it is a kind of a brick neighborhood. So we want to speak somewhat to that. We also very much want to speak to the adjacent residential building. The facade, as I said, would be a rain screen, but we're looking at several options, but probably our main option is a folded metal screen that actually rotates slightly as it comes up the building. It can be perforated, and therefore the difference between where the actual 40-foot by 40-foot opening is and the rest of the facade is de-emphasized. And I can go through the plans. Okay. These are the model. You see it here, so I'm going to skip through it. This is the cellar floor, the attenuators into the plenum. The ground floor has a loading dock, the emergency egress, and then circulation throughout the building. It's basically at maximum 45 feet by 90 feet. So very tight. The second floor and third floor, this is the upper attenuators, and these are the louvers that allow the fan to push the air through. The fourth and fifth floors, fourth floor being the upper level of the plenum mechanical room, and then the fifth and sixth floors being the electrical systems with an emergency backup generator on the roof. No, this building is totally unoccupied, except
I was wondering, is that meant for non-municipal emergency?
that's exactly, and for testing. And also it's coordinating, of course, with, there are also fans feeding in from the south end of the park as well, underground fans. We weren't able to do the underground fans here, given that we have a park.
This is a dumb.
Can you explain that? You weren't able to do the underground because?
Because first, we would need something that could expel the air. There's jet fans down below. Keith, do you want to?
Yeah, if I could, from the engineering front, so the way the ventilation for the whole park works is there's some overhead fans underneath the deck structure on block 5. They get their power and controlled from the building as well. And then the fans you saw on the first floor here, the 3 large fans, those are venting block 6 of the park. So it's 2 separate systems, one for each park, but all the power and control is in this building.
And there'll be no, this is like a dumb question, but no plumbing in the control room? Like there's no restroom or anything for when people need to work here?
We're still kind of working out whether there's a restroom or not. There doesn't need to be because it's an unoccupied building. There is a restroom, public restroom facility in the park. And I think it would be, it depends on who you're talking to, whether there's a preference for the restroom or not. It would be like a small single fixture.
Do you have more images?
Not really. I don't think we have other images at this time.
Okay, so then commissioners, do you have questions, comments? I have some, but I would defer to you all if you'd like to go first. Isabel?
I would like to talk a little bit more about the facade, if we can go back to the facade rendering. Several questions. I mean, you mentioned that materially, I assume you haven't yet defined what the materials are since you're still in concept.
Yes, we are working with DOT and Parks Department on the materials. And so we wanted to work with them more about what they're thinking about in terms of maintenance. Obviously, we're looking at a materials, and the thoughts we have are ones that are low maintenance because we knew that would be an issue. And so, but that's something that at the conceptual level, we're not really ready to put forward because we do want to study it a little more, but the goal is obviously something that's is refined, but at the same time, low maintenance.
I mean, I would say my first impression, you mentioned using kind of a warmer color palette because it relates to the building next door. But the truth of the matter is that this neighborhood has a lot of new buildings going up, and they're all very, very different materially. There's some that are a lot of glass in lighter metals. You have Hudson Yards that also has a great combination of materials. There's the one next door, and there's kind of the industrial context of these lower brick buildings. To me, because the neighborhood is changing so much, I would err less on the side of perhaps speaking directly to the building next to this building and perhaps a little bit more to the park, which is, you described this building as being kind of the northern anchor of the park, which I thought was a really interesting way to think about it. But this doesn't quite relate to me materially to the park. And I'm just wondering if that's a different way to start thinking about your materiality. This potential at this lower brick building is also going to be demolished in the future and become something else. And to what extent should this building be more that threshold, that northern threshold to the park, which I think it's really interesting because this park is tucked away from the north. Unless you know it, you don't quite find it. And having this building as being kind of that marker, I think it's a really interesting concept. At the moment, it feels like something else, not quite related to the park.
So I hear what you're saying, and we've had that discussion. And another reason that drew us towards the warmer representation is that the facade of this maintenance and operations facility is Corten. So from that point of view, we are looking at a continuity. The other built portions of the park are wood or wood look and white marble, which is what, again, these are very preliminary studies, and the white marble came up as a material that will already be in the park. We are by no means final on the, you know, the tones and colors of any of these materials. As Angela said, it's really a working exercise.
Where's the marble in the park?
The marble is in the public restroom. So
The one by
and-
36th Street?
it's,
On block 6, if you remember from the design we put forward, there's a marble facade on the public restroom.
Okay.
Surrounding it, huge stones are gonna be built and actually done gravitationally.
That hasn't been built yet.
Right, it hasn't been built
Okay,
yet.
it's
Yeah.
not the bathroom that's there that has the orange
Correct.
flag.
no, no, no,
Got it.
no.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that it's the one in
Right.
block 6,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mm.
But it's the one here in.
Yeah.
This one that's over the ruin, under the ruin walk, and then
Mhm.
there's the bridge that there's this walkway, and then the piers for that will also be marble stones stacked up to look like the bridge is resting on these stones, marble stones.
Yeah, in both of those buildings, the idea is that they are kind of emerging from the ground.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I am not that familiar with that new portion of the park. I think that came here before my time. I'm familiar with the built portion, and that built portion doesn't have these materials, which is perhaps where my question's coming from. It's a lot more kind of lighter grays and a lot of granite. So I think in the future, understanding the thought process behind the facade and how it relates perhaps to this newer portion would be helpful. Because as I said, I really like the narrative of thinking about this as the northern threshold to the park. And I would see that being a stronger relationship than this building, which will likely be one of many in this context, the residential building.
Right.
Yeah, the block 4 that was built and finished just recently has the large marble, white blocks, Danby marble. And then from that, block 5, becomes a mist fountain where there's also marble along the ground plane. And then the next step is to become more naturalistic, which is something the community board had looked for with the stonework. And that's in the public restroom. But obviously, I know you all had that presentation, but happy to come back and present that again, or as we're, we'll be doing that as part of the next step with the, the prelim, the next prelim and final. But, I think you guys have that presentation.
Are these same owners? The building behind it has to come down.
No,
No.
And is
This
it-
one?
Yeah.
you mean?
but that is a warehouse building, but this building owns this.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Those-
Oh, just this area way, not the building
Not the
itself.
building.
Right, it just has a connection through. And that's what also made the property so small that we are using for the
Is
vent
this the
building.
only place you can put this?
Yes, I mean, unless we want to put it in the middle of the park, which is something we did not want to do.
So your choices are limited.
Very limited, unfortunately, but yes, but I mean, we're fortunate that we actually have this piece left over from the properties that we.
If I
needed
was
to take.
Steve Ross and I had built that building, the one that you're about to rebut, I'd fight you, but obviously.
I had a question about the facade also, just this kind of gestural image of, this kind of darkened area, kind of like a smudge on the building. Is that just made from making the perforations larger, or is there? I know it seems to be in front of the fans, like, is there a functional purpose for that? Because
Absolutely.
some of the, the examples that you showed, like of the Wiley Theater, like it's
Mhm.
clearly like windows, so like the
It's-
perforations are larger, but this is, there's function to this, but I'm just, I'm on the fence about this being such a gestural,
Mhm.
kind of like, it almost becomes like a piece of artwork rather than it being like a, functional sort of building.
Right. We've had those discussions, of course, as well. And that's something that will evolve as we finalize or get closer to finalizing the materials. There is a specific open area that's required there. So that will certainly have more openings. We are able to insulate the building from the inside. So, and it's a concrete structure, so it's only going to be the air and waterproofing dark along the building, the building enclosure proper. And so we really will have the ability to play with those openings so that they either emphasize or de-emphasize that functional aspect of the building.
I think,
Uh,
yeah, I
Bill-
think for me, if it's, if, you know, it all, you know, it contrasts like the structure of the building.
Mm.
So I think it's interesting in that sense, but then it creates such a gesture too.
Mhm.
So I guess I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about it, but I kind of, you know, I'm a bit on the fence about it being so gestural as a kind of almost like an artwork or a symbol or something.
Bill, you were going to ask something.
Thank you. And maybe this is more, Angela, you were saying it has to be on this site. And is that understanding that Hudson Yards has been in planning for 15 years, and I'm probably short selling, it's probably 17 years. Has it always been indicated on like master plans that there would need to be, because it was understood there would be platforming here. So it must have been understood there had to be some ventilation because of the platforming. Has it
Right,
always
and I
been
think
indicated
most
that,
people thought the venting would potentially, I wasn't around at that
Yeah.
time, would occur like in the park, almost as like a passive ventilation. And, you
Right.
know, they started as our team started putting in the passive, which are giant circles and things that have to be 10 foot high.
yeah,
It started eating away at the park, but also Amtrak does not allow the passive because the other concern is, you know, a lot of this was open cut before the Amtrak, but it's
Yeah.
the more development's coming, it's closing it up. So they want, each site has to address its own environmental and fire and life safety. So technically on Block 4, when that building, there's a Tishman Spire site, when that's built, they'll have to put a vent building there. And of course, you know, like Beth mentioned, Related already has a vent building. It's part of their office building at 55 Hudson Yards. And there's also some vent buildings that are near the hotel, which have, or where the Javits Center site is. So there's all those vent buildings. They're all, you know, along this. And obviously the big vent building right in the middle of Hudson Yards.
is that one about the same height, about 10 floors?
I'm not sure how tall that one is. I mean, obviously this is narrower, so it's probably, this may be a little tall,
That's the
right?
height here is a function of the narrowness of this, of
Right,
the parcel.
exactly, yes.
But as the architect for the 7-line extension, yes, they are comparable in size. I mean, you can see opposite Javits, that one lone building that remains to be built around is of similar, actually much larger size than this.
And we're also working to bring the height down as much as we can, floor to floor. They've even studied that, so I think it's gotten a little bit less. I'm not sure, Keith, if we know yet how much more we were able to shave off, but we're actually, as we engineer it, we're trying to get as low as possible.
So does anything ever emit from that, you know, that vents where this kind of cloud is? This large cloud,
If,
sludge type thing?
if there is
An
an
emergency,
emergency.
Yeah. I guess I just think of that as like an image.
Pardon?
When they maintain, they don't have to clear the events.
Well, I mean, those wouldn't be, there wouldn't be
won't be
anything they
anything
would
in
be
it.
clearing except running and operating. They're not, there's nothing in there that's like smoke or something. They're
But would,
just,
But
would there be soot? Would there be like residue or soot that would just be there that would come out, or
I don't think so. Hopefully they would be cleaning the
because of the scrubber?
machinery, but
Okay.
I don't think so.
So,
I just think,
Talk to that.
you know, just to consider, I'm not saying no to that part. I mean, I like that it's, you know, kind of creative and, you know, you know, it's sort of gestural against the kind of structure of the building, but if like something, you know, bad were to happen, if you see smoke emitting from that, you know, it's a bit on the nose, right? Because it looks like a cloud already, and so it smokes emitting from it. You know, in a worst case scenario, you know, it's a bit on the nose. It's like an image in like media or something. So I think that's something to consider in like what the form of this gesture is, because it's really just a sign.
Yes.
Essentially, it's not really anything functional. Like it could be square. It could just
Yes.
follow the shape of the vents. It can be something that's a cloud or an image. So I think that's maybe something to consider too.
The actual openings there are exactly what, I mean, in the concrete structure, when you saw that elevation?
So it follows this shape exactly then?
Yeah.
Oh, it does, okay.
And I think some of the preliminary things they had that were, like even sometimes creating a shape as part of the screen. So I'm not sure, is that what you're talking about? Actually creating some kind of shape?
Well, I'm just talking about the shape. that we
Yeah,
see on
yeah, I
screen.
think
circle
you're
of a
talking about
curve.
the kind of the fingers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a cloud or a smudge of some
Mhm.
sort.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I think it can be very beautiful in some sense, but, I also think like if there's smoke coming out of it, as an image, it just feels, very like on the nose and
Yeah.
very like, it's a picture of a cloud and smoke is coming out of it. So I think that's maybe because it's an image. So I'm just considering like, well, what's a potential image that would come out of this if it like actually performs its function of like ventilating smoke?
What we have to do is, what Amtrak has to do is to be able to egress all of the people from the train in a certain amount of time. And I have no idea about the operation beyond that, but that is really the requirement. It's not a station per se, as the Seven Line is, but we do have that pathway that we need to be able to get that number of people that have been calculated to be on the train for the load of the emergency out of that space.
But I think, if I may, I think what we're saying is that you have an incredible opportunity here. This is very large, very prominent building in what will be the northern entrance to Bella Abzug Park. And right now, it has a kind of darkness to it. I think that's what Manuel means by on the nose. It's suggestive of like, you may be entering a park, like bad things can happen here in a way.
Not exactly. I'm just
There's-
saying like that dark thing in the center of the building, it's an image.
Exactly.
It looks like it's something burnt.
Yeah, it
Yes.
looks like a cloud or something.
Right.
And if you see a picture of a cloud in the building, and then, God forbid something bad happens, like smoke comes out of it from the tunnel, then in the media, when this is, if that happens, smoke,
Interesting.
real smoke.
You're
coming
saying
out
it
of the-
appears in the soot that's
Yeah,
left
or
over.
it looks, yeah, so I'm
Okay,
just,
get
I'm
it.
just saying, consider that this is not really functional, it's a symbol and it's something visual. And so if you think of the function of this, like, if it's going to emit smoke, through that ventilation area, what you'll see is a picture of real smoke, signifying something bad's happening, coming out of like, what's basically an image of smoke that's in the facade of the building. That's, I'm not saying that's to prevent this, expiration or to not do it. I'm just saying that's something that should be considered in
Sure.
thinking of what this is visually or gesturally, because, it actually really, it's just a picture, essentially. It could be square to show where the vents are, or it could be more gestural like this as
it
well.
could-
Yeah.
It is the only variation on the facade, so it just
Yeah.
calls a lot of attention to itself. So the question is, what is the intent, right?
It's
What-
iconic, essentially. It's not a pattern, it's not a texture, it's iconic. So people will see this and think of it as a picture.
Mhm.
And in some ways, it could be used to tell, I mean, what it is an important, good safety measure that we're taking in our city, where we're concerned about the quality of life for workers underground. We're concerned about preparing for emergencies, should there be one. So, I mean, we've been looking at a lot of infrastructure lately that announces its use through the facade. And I think what you're hearing is just that there's a kind of this is ready for a tragedy. And in some ways, the message could be, and this is for all of you to do, the message could be, this is welcoming you to the park, and should need be, this is going to serve everyone's safety, as opposed to this is ready for black smoke to come out of it kind of thing. Well, I want to ask also about the marble, because you talked about the marble sort of being in essence, you didn't use this word, but like rustication, right? Because it's the part that's touching the ground. And, but I mean, I'm wondering, like, I know it was referencing other materials in the park. To me, marble's like very refined material. And I wonder about I'm just asking you to speak to that as compared to the rest of it, which is much more robust in materiality and rougher.
Mhm. Our thought is really that it has to be something that is very easy to maintain and that is a very clean material. We're looking at something panelized. I think stone is typical for a base for buildings, but I hear what you're saying that Deborah, that the marble itself may be not or the white marble even may not be the right expression of that.
I mean, that's sort of a matter of taste. What I'm really
Right.
speaking to is just like the delicacy of it in conjunction with the other materials that you've chosen. And just if it's meant to be a rustication function, like match, like Isabel spoke earlier to this structure is speaking to the park. So I think there's ways that like white marble wouldn't I mean, it would speak to maybe the restrooms that are further south, but it doesn't speak to like the kind of, let's say, glacial quality of the granite that underlies and shale our city,
Right.
which might be more, just something to consider.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I could imagine, again, not having seen the proposal of the marble water feature you mentioned. Marble, Danby marble is local to Vermont and it can be quite rustic if you give it a really interesting
Yeah.
rough finish.
There you
And it can have beautiful veining that does speak more to the what you were mentioning, the bedrock, the more natural aspects of this portion of New York City as opposed to the marble that speaks to the high-end office building lobbies, right? So I guess perhaps maybe that's where we're curious. What is your thought? It can take so many ways. I could actually see quite a beautiful marble base if it does speak more to the geology and to the park treatment of marble, as opposed to something very clean and more corporate looking.
Right, right.
If I could just interject that I think white marble's incredibly impractical in terms of maintenance. And on 10th Avenue with the soot and the traffic, if other white marble buildings in town are any indication, it just soaks it up.
We're not really set. I think the whole design team is not set on designs. We're getting input from you. But between Parks and DOT, we're going to figure out how this building is maintained. And we did have some concern about marble down to the ground. So your comments sort of parallel ours. So I just wanted you to know that that's why we haven't set on the material and that was our concern. So we're looking at something that we can maintain the city in some form or city consolidates. Thank you.
Commissioners, before I summarize, any other comments? So we really appreciate thinking of this as sort of in a sculptural way, because it will be the main function of this building, we hope, right? That it's this kind of marker for the entrance to the north end of the park. And so when you come back, we'd love it to have your thoughts on how you might think about the facade materiality. And Nancy just mentioned you're still working through that. The readability of it as a kind of what it is, how do I know if I'm visiting the park, like what is that thing? Why doesn't it have any windows? And maybe that is signage, but maybe there's something about the vent pattern that we understand that the vent pattern is actually just marking where smoke would need to come out. But maybe there's a way to, as Manuel was saying earlier, that in effect, it could be patterned in any way.
Right.
So maybe that's an opportunity there. But overall, we commend the thinking of this in a sculptural sense, and we look forward to the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, everybody.
And with that, that concludes our meeting, and the public meeting is now adjourned.